Welcome back to Storytime with Scott Boss. Today we're going to continue the Graveyard Gazette. We are on Chapter 9. Bruce took the most convincing when their shift was over, but he agreed to a free breakfast afterwards. They rode separate to Bremerton Memorial Gardens, parking across the street at Anchor Baptist Church. Carrie led the skeptical group towards the locked gate. His heart sunk when the paper was not in its usual place just outside the gate. Then, as fear gripped him, he spotted it just short of the ditch on the left where the mother possum died days before. I wonder if the paper boy was just off today, Carrie thought, and was immediately realizing how ridiculous of a thought it was. Still, how did the paper get there if it wasn't dropped off? Carrie picked up the paper, noticeably less dew on it today, and for that he was happy. He slid the bag off and unfolded the paper for all of them to take a look. The headline was there, just as he hoped. Local resident dies in home after falling down the stairs and sustaining a head injury. Richard Mayfield came home from fishing Saturday afternoon to find his wife Bonnie dead at the bottom of the stairs. Saturday afternoon, said Johnny. See, it's Saturday morning. There's still time. We can save this lady. Who's to say it's this Saturday, said Bruce. Look at the date, said Carrie. At the top right of the paper was the date, Saturday, November 19. Could have happened last week. Bruce's voice was less certain. Not in the headline, Michelle spoke quietly, her brow furrowed. They wouldn't use a slip and fall death from last week as the headline for this week. Okay, said Bruce. So what then? We go to her house and forbid her to use the stairs? I don't know, Carrie stared at the headline. But we try. We've got to try something. Let's do it. Johnny looked between Michelle and Bruce. You in? Shit, Bruce crossed his arms. We've come this far. Michelle looked back across the street. We riding together? Whose car can fit all four of us? Bruce raised his hand. I'll drive. That way I can leave your asses if this is a prank. No one argued with that, and soon they were piled into his Oldsmobile with Johnny riding shotgun, paper in hand. We're headed to Riverwind, said Johnny. You know where that is? I'm on it. Bruce pulled the car into gear with a clunk. Old folks community by Harris Park. Oh shit, said Michelle. Are we talking retirement home? Don't they have nurses? No, Johnny turned back. I think this one is just 55 and up. My mom talked about moving in there years back. So what's the game plan, Carrie? You're holding the paper. Does it have an address? Johnny took a second. Nope, just says the neighborhood and their name. We'll have to figure it out when we get there. Bruce drove on, rolling his eyes like an unbeliever, but deep down, feeling the excitement building. Riverwind was a small two-street community with mostly two-bedroom houses on quarter-acre lots. It was a step above condos and helped convince the elderly they were still with it enough to take a few riding lawnmower passes over their lawn. Bruce drove down the main entrance, passing meticulously tended shrubs along the median. There was a sign for the office to the right that Bruce followed until he found a building with large double doors and a pool behind the black iron fence. He parked in the furthest spot from the door, facing the pool. So what now? Asked Michelle. Think we can just go in and ask where this Bonnie lady lives? We could try, I guess, Carrie unbuckled. I didn't see any mailboxes at any of the houses, said Johnny. They probably have them in the mailroom in there somewhere. Good idea. Carrie reached for the door handle. Yeah, said Bruce. Large black man will be staying in the car. Nothing freaks out old white people more than me. Excuse me, said Michelle. Tattooed lesbian over here. Just both of you stay in the car, said Carrie. Johnny and I will go see what we can find. Everyone agreed as Carrie and Johnny headed to the office doors. Bruce fidgeted nervously with the steering wheel, hoping nobody would be crazy enough to be using the pool in 40-degree weather. Carrie opened the double doors. Immediately to his right was a hallway that led to a workout center, pool, and mailroom, according to the sign. Johnny tipped his hand at Carrie and ducked down the hall, while Carrie continued to the front desk. There was a couple of couches and chairs surrounding a coffee table with issues of Better Homes and Gardens and Sports Illustrated displayed on top. Carrie noticed a Chicago Cubs player celebrating on the cover and thought back to Johnny's confession that he knew Carrie was bullshitting every time they talked baseball. He shook his head with a laugh when he heard, "Can I help you?" A plump lady in a brown jacket and matching skirt appeared just a few feet to his left. She must have come out of one of the offices. She was giving him a look that said, "You don't look 55." Carrie would appreciate that on any other day. "Yeah," he replied. "I was stopping to visit my aunt." He paused. Her name had flown out of his head on the walk up. They left the paper in the car. The lady looked at him intently. "Yes, and her name?" "Well, she told me she was staying here in Riverwind, but forgot to mention the address." "Okay, and her—" "She can be so forgetful sometimes, you know." Carrie could feel his cheeks heating up. He looked back and felt a wave of relief to see Johnny coming back out of the hallway. He waved frantically for him to join them. "There's my brother, John." Johnny approached them, and Carrie continued. "Hey, John, I was just telling Stapleton, Miss Stapleton that we're visiting our aunt here, and she forgot to tell us her house number." "Ah, that old bird," Johnny gave a nervous laugh. "I'm sorry," said Miss Stapleton. "I have a directory. I just need her name." Carrie looked at Johnny and smiled a too big smile. "Bonnie," said Johnny. "Mayfield." Both men let out a breath as the last name came out. "Oh, Mrs. Mayfield," said Miss Stapleton. She eyed them both up and down. "How are you related again?" Carrie looked to Johnny, then back. "She's our aunt." And when Miss Stapleton's eyes narrowed, he added, "On our mother's side," with a chuckle. "Right." She tucked behind the desk and was clicking away at the keyboard. "She and your uncle are just such sweet, nice people." She paused as if it were a test. "Yep, Uncle Rich," said Carrie. "Good old Uncle Rich." Johnny smiled, happy Carrie remembered that one, then added, "Yeah, he's probably out fishing, though. Likes to get 'em early while they're biting." Miss Stapleton's face finally relaxed a little, and she looked up. "He sure does. Like clockwork every Saturday." The guys nodded, hoping they'd passed her test. Those were all the details they had unless they wanted to talk about her unsteady gait. 85, Miss Stapleton said finally. "You keep following the curve you took in, and it's the last place before the road heads back out." "Gotcha," said Carrie. "Thanks for your help." They headed back to Bruce's car, not daring to look back and see if she'd called security. "John," said Johnny. "Good cover there, double-O idiot." "She can't do anything with just a first name." Carrie opened the back door. "How'd it go?" asked Bruce as they climbed in quickly but as natural as possible. "We'll find out in a minute," said Carrie. Bruce pulled out and followed their directions to address 85. It was a small ranch that looked a lot like every other small ranch in the neighborhood, only it was a light shade of purple, whereas most of the others were piss yellow or baby poop brown. It was a nice change. "So what now?" Bruce stopped in front of the driveway but didn't pull in. "I guess I'll go ring the doorbell," said Carrie. "Maybe talk with her and see if she's showing any signs of shit, I don't know." "Good plan as any," said Michelle. "We'll be here in the car." "Yeah." Carrie didn't want to go alone, but realized how intimidating a group of strangers would look. He popped the door open and slowly walked up the drive. There were bushes in need of trimming and a ceramic garden frog tipped over on its side. Carrie hit the stoop and raised his hand, then saw the doorbell and tried it first. He could hear the chime in the house, but no movement. Then he tried knocking again, listening for movement. The house was silent. He wasn't sure if this was good or bad. He looked back to the car and gave a sheepish shrug. They shrugged back, and he decided to give it one more try before they regrouped. This time he rang and knocked back to back. Still nothing. Then he heard a harsh whisper, "Carrie." He turned around to see Michelle hanging out the window, waving him to come back. A police cruiser was coming around the corner. Carrie froze. If he ran, it would be obvious, and much to Bruce's point. If an unknown black man was seen peeling out of the neighborhood, they'd be chased without a doubt. He waited, turning silently back towards the door of the purple house, while trying to keep an eye on the cruiser. It pulled directly behind the Oldsmobile, and Carrie's heart sank. He started back to the car, casually calling to his friends as he saw the policeman open his door. "Guess she's not home." "Good morning," called the policeman at the front of his car, hand ready on his gun while his partner stood up from the passenger door. "Morning," said Carrie, not expanding on his reply, knowing his improv skills were severely lacking. "Visiting a friend?" asked the cop, eyeing the Oldsmobile. "Aunt," said Carrie, "though I don't think she's home. I'll have to give her a call later." "You bring the whole family?" He pointed towards Bruce's car. "Just some friends." Carrie was stopped at the bottom of the drive, wanting to jump in the car and take off. You drop in on her unannounced like this often? Carrie could feel the interrogation beginning and knew he needed a counterattack. No, but I was just checking on her. She hasn't been in the best health lately. Just wanted to make sure she was doing all right. Is that so? Said the cop. Well, why doesn't your friend cut his engine and you and I will go check on her together while my partner Jeff here waits with them? I don't see why, Carrie started, but Bruce shut off his car and tossed the keys to the driveway to show thorough compliance. Good, said the cop. Officer Hargrove, according to his badge. After you. Carrie kept a hand. Jeff kept a hand on his gun and stood between the cars. Carrie walked back up the drive slowly, catching himself looking back and seeing eyes right behind him. They reached the door and Carrie looked at the cop. I mean, I've tried a few times, and just one more. For me. Carrie shrugged and hit the doorbell. They listened to it echo off the walls together. Then Hargrove was off the stoop, peering in the window. He looked up at Carrie, then back to the window. Jeff, get up here. What's going on? Said Carrie. Stand aside, sir, and don't you dare leave. Now he was at the door, trying the handle, but it was locked. The officer put his boot heel just below the handle. It took 3 tries before the door swung open and he rushed in. Carrie couldn't help but peek in to see the figure of a woman lying on the floor. Just behind her was a pull-down ladder leading to the attic. A box of decorative pumpkins and pilgrims were littered about. Officer Hargrove ordered his partner to call an ambulance while he checked the body. He turned her over and Carrie realized why Miss Stapleton gave such a pause at the mention of his aunt. Bonnie Mayfield was black. They should have sent Bruce in after all, though he wasn't sure they would have spotted her and kicked the door down without the police. After he called the ambulance, Jeff joined his partner and Carrie could hear them discussing Bonnie Mayfield's fall down the attic stairs. Finally, they called him over. Carrie joined them at the body. She was breathing unsteadily, but breathing at least. Your aunt have any health conditions we need to know about? Hargrove asked. I'm really not sure. I just know she'd been out of sorts lately, and I thought I should stop by. Jeff looked at him seriously. It's a damn good thing you did. Hargrove agreed. Within a minute, the ambulance arrived, and they loaded her up on a stretcher and hauled her off. After watching them go, Hargrove had turned back towards Carrie's group while Jeff called out to him from their police cruiser. Hey, we've got a 1065 down by Rolling Oaks Apartments. Shit, Hargrove looked at Carrie for 3 seconds before turning to Jeff. Tell them we're on our way. And he turned back to Carrie. The EMS said they'd contact her husband when they had her in a room. They'll be at Davie County. He looked up at the house. Tell the officer about the door. They'll send the maintenance guy by. He gave Carrie a second to reply. Thank you, said Carrie. He wasn't telling him he had no intention of going to the hospital to visit her. Hargrove nodded to him and power walked to the driver's side of the police cruiser. Within seconds they were off, with lights flashing. Carrie got in the back seat of the car and let out a deep breath. Well, that could have gone worse, I think. He told the group as many details as he could while the ambulance was there. So she's going to make it? Said Michelle. Sounds like it, said Carrie. We can call the hospital later if you want. Everyone nodded. They were all involved now. Electricity seemed to move through the car around them. We've got to stop by the office on the way out, said Carrie, and we'll tell him about the door. But the group barely heard him. We saved her, said Bruce. Well, Carrie did, said Johnny. But still, Bruce slapped the steering wheel. I was the driver. She was going to live because of us, because of Carrie. A cheer went up from Johnny, Bruce, and Michelle. It was really Officer Hargrove. Carrie didn't know why he was still deflecting. It was like he needed confirmation a few more times over before he'd believe it. He kicked the door in and found her. But we let him there, said Johnny. We were so damn suspicious being the nephews of a black lady that they called the cops on us, he laughed. And that's what saved her. Can't argue with that, said Carrie. They stopped by the office and Miss Stapleton assured them somebody would be by soon to fix her door. It was just a miracle that you came by to see her today, she said. And she wasn't far off. Carrie got back in the car and Bruce drove them out of Riverwind. Believe me now? Asked Carrie. Or do we have to go back to the graveyard tomorrow? Oh, we're going back tomorrow. Bruce threw a huge smile at his co-workers. Right? I'm there, said Johnny. Didn't we almost get arrested today? Michelle reasoned. Yeah, Bruce agreed. And we don't even know this lady's going to live. True, said Johnny. Never mind the fact that we're taking cues from some psychic morning news. "We are," said Carrie. "Doesn't this seem a little off to you guys?" "Totally off," said Johnny. "And you're good with that?" "Yeah," all three guys agreed. "What else are we gonna do?" said Johnny. "Eat at Harry's every morning, then go home and whack at the pictures of Carrie's ex-wife?" "Oh, come on." Carrie put his hands to his head, as if to block any incoming mental images. "Good point," said Michelle. "I'm in. I just wanted to note that we're all crazy for doing this and not telling the proper authorities about it." "Who are the proper authorities when it comes to psychic newspapers?" asked Johnny. "Dionne Warwick? Miss Cleo? An exorcist?" "Another good point." Then Bruce pulled into Anchor Baptist Church. Carrie was on the phone with Davie County Hospital. "Yes, my aunt was brought in by ambulance. I'm trying to see if she's stable for a visit." He paused for a second, then replied, "Bonnie Mayfield." "Yep. Thank you." Then after a few seconds he spoke again. "Thank you. That's good to hear. Have a nice day." He hung up the phone and a cheer went up within the car. "We did something good today," said Bruce. "If I sleep at all, it will be good sleep." "Amen to that," Johnny agreed. They split up that morning with plans to return the following morning. They defied death, at least for the moment. That's the end for Chapter 9. See you next week.